Okay, they have updated the live stream control room for YouTube, which means it's going to be very interesting to see if I can actually get everything working correctly. When they make changes like these, it always causes significant issues for me because I don't know if they have necessarily fixed all the problems they need to. And I'm hoping that it all is well. I think that is all working. Let us see if there is actually anything coming through on my end. Can you guys actually hear me? Oh, right. It's working. Oh my gosh. I was I was concerned. I couldn't see anything, and now I can. That's good news. Okay. Okay, so we've got our face. I'll bring that up and I'll go over things really quickly. You will find the start time for this video down in the description for those of you who want to watch it later on and you can't hang around for the live stream. I totally understand. How's it going, John? Look, also with my live streams, they go unlisted, so unless you subscribe to my channel, have hit the bell button, and you have notifications turned on, you won't get the notifications for this video, okay? So make sure that is actually turned on, otherwise you won't be able to go and access it later on. Otherwise, my patrons get access to the live streams. If they don't have all those bits and pieces turned on, they'll have access to that. I do an edited version of all of my live streams that gets released at a later date, not necessarily the next day, but it takes a little bit of time, but that will come out eventually, okay? For those of you who are interested in watching that. But the edited version does not include the Q&A or questions and answers at the end, which is often what tends to be a big focus for a lot of people who want to watch the sort of content that I make. So if you haven't been part of my live streams before, normally what I do is I'm going to present everything first, and then I'm going to show you a bunch of slides. Yes, there will be my face will be available. I'll do that during the Q&A at the end. And then, yeah, that's where we'll open it up for questions and answers. I would ask, if you are a Dungeon Master, that you try to refrain from asking Dungeon Master questions. If you're a player playing in this campaign, this is more about you. What would be helpful, though, is if you are a Dungeon Master and there are things you want your players to know, to bring those up in the live chat so that we discuss them here, so that when players watch the video, those sorts of topics are discussed so that they get that information without you having to repeat it again and again and again, which is often what tends to happen when you're running your own game. Okay, so let's get ourselves organized and we'll go through this, and hopefully I'll be swift. I've got a lot of notes. I do apologize. I will try to be swift. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. Dungeons and Dragons 5e as it happens. Today's topic is the Player's Guide to the Hoard of the Dragon Queen. And with a Player's Guide, there are no spoilers. I have done my best to make sure I do not include spoilers that will ruin the adventure for you and make your Dungeon Master very angry. I don't want to do that. Do not anger the Dungeon Master. That is the task for today. Now, this is more about the players rather than the Dungeon Masters in terms of a guide, but I'm hoping that everybody will find something useful in this video. Whether you are a player or a Dungeon Master, I'm hoping that Dungeon Masters will share this video with their players, particularly if they are in the process of playing the game or about to start running the game. I really want to be clear about my point of view with regard to the Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I hate this adventure as a Dungeon Master with a vengeance. I really despise it. When I ran it, it was so much trouble. But I want to make it clear that my players really generally enjoyed themselves. They had a good time. They could see issues within the story structure that had nothing to do with my dungeon mastering. They could acknowledge that, they could see it, but they still had a good time. The first thing to know is that the adventure is pretty awful. It has a weak story and structure. And when I say weak story and structure, I mean like crazy bad. That's how bad it is, which I know bunch of you will probably be saying, that sounds very strange. I don't understand. It's like the first adventure that was released for Dungeons & Dragons 5e, short of the adventure book from the starter kit. So what's going on there? Well, my personal opinion, but I still feel it is a very weak story. The adventure is super linear, very, very linear, with really no significant player choices throughout it. In fact, if players try to make choices and make decisions, that's going to actually cause an awful lot of trouble for everybody, not just the Dungeon Master. My advice to you as a player is follow your Dungeon Master clues, their prompts, or the campaign will crash and burn. It has a very simple and obvious adventure hook, but unfortunately, for some strange reason, I don't know why, somehow our designers for this adventure have managed to sabotage the whole thing with pointless road trips and meaningless and very boring non-player characters. I don't know how that's possible, not with you a professional designer. Kobold Press has got a really good name, so what was going on, I do not know. Don't forget the adventure quest goal. I know I said it was really simple and obvious, but for some strange reason, due to a variety of different things, it's really easy to forget what your adventure goal is on this railroad. It is essentially a railroad, that's what it is, but you will actually forget what the goal is. And it's a product of a lot of different things, and I will explain, but generally it's just frustration, boredom, and in some cases just annoyance, driving the players nutty, and they start forgetting what they're actually trying to achieve in the first place. So just be warned, be really careful about that. People really like the idea of playing this adventure, and primarily it's because Tiamat is in there, the main villain. And it smells of dragons. When you say something like the tyranny of dragons, that means there's got to be lots and lots of dragons in there. Well, there's not necessarily going to be lots and lots of dragons in there. And, the evil queen of dragons, what could be more exciting? So this is often a big draw. Now, so if that's the draw for you as a player, I want to warn you that there are some things you need to do to make it successful. You cannot rely on your Dungeon Master to do all the work, otherwise this adventure will be very short. Things like teamwork, thinking smart are going to increase your chances of success. It's actually very easy to wind up failing and having some significant problems early on if you don't use teamwork and think smart. You're going to have to make some really hard choices that you really weren't expecting. The adventure has a lot of combat that's quite grindy in some of the chapters, and this is so grindy in fact that even the slayers within your group, those players who love combat, may in fact start getting bored. It's very easy for players to derail this adventure by being silly, by getting bored or frustrated. Essentially, just a light breeze could fell the entire adventure campaign tree if you're not careful. There are adventure-specific backgrounds and bonds in the back of the adventure book for individual characters, and I really want you to use them. So go and ask your Dungeon Master if they haven't been using them, and see if you can actually include them into your character. They will significantly help bond you to the adventure and help with some of the other issues that I've talked about. Often you'll find a Dungeon Master will find it easier to let this derailed Tyranny of Dragons campaign end rather than try and find a solution. Now, if you've got a really, really competent, experienced Dungeon Master and they've managed to find a way forward, wonderful, that's great news. There are very few fixes for a derailed campaign of this nature. This is often due to designers' experimental rail track. I don't know how you can make an adventure so railroady that all you have to do is a slight nudge and the whole thing comes off the track. But apparently that's entirely possible, and I can't count the number of times people have mentioned how difficult it is to get back on. So I want you to be really understanding with your Dungeon Master. If they come to you one day after something's taken place that has sort of derailed the campaign, and they say, look, I can't figure out how to solve this, I'm just going to end the campaign. It's just too much hard work, because there are so many times when this will come up. So be really understanding with your Dungeon Master if you don't get through the whole thing. I want you to consider being very patient with everything that goes on in this adventure, because the adventure really demands it, and it demands it from a player constantly. Otherwise, really, things will go badly. One of the biggest issues you'll find is anybody who's playing a greedy character. Greedy characters will likely burn the whole story, send it to hell for everybody. The problem with including something like the word hoard, which in the title, right, is that sort of suggests big treasure hoard. So what I want you to imagine is, imagine somebody says there's a hoard of the Dragon Queen. Imagine there's a hoard of treasure and you cannot touch it under no circumstances. That's what I want you to visualize in your mind when you're playing this game. If you can stick with that, things will go all right. Combat is often the wrong action for a few situations, particularly in some of the areas in the adventure or parts of the adventure that really are looking for you to use your character as an infiltration unit. So infiltrate, find out the information you require, and move on. Make smart decisions, because this adventure expects you to be a veteran player. It's one of those adventures which really isn't really suitable for new players, which is why I always tend to recommend The Lost Mine of Phandelver as your first foray into Dungeons & Dragons if you've never played the game before. So a veteran player will understand what's taking place, and they'll be able to figure out how to do a lot of these things. That doesn't save them from some of the consequences, but really I feel like this whole adventure was designed for very experienced dungeon masters and very experienced veteran players rather than newbies. Combat encounters are not always fair or balanced. In fact, they are the absolute reverse of that. There are wild variations in difficulty. You're going to get stuff that's very hard or literally almost impossible, and some stuff that's very easy and could well be the same sort of stuff over and over again. The beginning of the adventure in particular, through design and error, has absolutely impossible situations that cannot be solved by your character. And if you want to survive, engaging in combat will be the last thing that you wind up doing. So be warned. It takes anywhere from about 6 months to about a year playing on a regular basis. If you play roughly, I would say every week for maybe 2 hours, you should get through it in about 6 months. I've heard of some people who have taken about a year to play through. That might have simply been because there's been a lot of party discussions and stuff like that, but it can take a fair amount of chunk of time. The book is actually quite short. There's actually not too much to it. But in terms of putting it forward and making it work, it doesn't seem to work out quite the way you would expect. So your timing is roughly half a year to a year. Now the good news for those of you who want some good news, and that is that the follow-up book or adventure from the Hoard of the Dragon Queen, The Rise of Tiamat, is a much better story, vastly better, with lots more options available for players. So you actually have a lot more player choice. And I feel like it is a much more in-depth adventure. It's pretty tough for a dungeon master to run, but it doesn't suffer the sorts of problems that Hoard of the Dragon Queen suffers from. And both of these adventures, Hoard of the Dragon Queen and The Rise of Tiamat, are really light on information. So if you are trying to ask a lot of information regarding locations that you go to, you're going to find your dungeon master probably has zero to no information unless they've done additional homework. And literally they have to do all that homework because there is nothing in the adventure for them to really work with, nothing of any significance. Now I'm hoping you've found this video helpful. I know it sounds like a lot of doom and gloom, but I want to make it clear that the issue is more for getting the dungeon master to make it work. And as long as you have a group of players who work together and understand that they're dealing with a very fragile piece of glass, this adventure, you will have a good time, because my players had a good time. And I've talked to many other groups and they had a good time as well. It's just going to be quite stressful for the Dungeon Master because they just don't know what's going to happen and how to make it more appealing to you. They will have to do a bit of work. So, not all doom and gloom, but some things to remember. Remember, fragile piece of glass. Now, if you are looking for other videos that you might be interested in, more content, I have stuff for players and Dungeon Masters covering every aspect of the game. You're welcome to go and check that out. I have a very small series of videos more designed for Dungeon Masters on how to run Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I've only got the first couple of chapters there, but you might find that useful if you're a Dungeon Master, or at least point your Dungeon Master towards those videos to make their lives a little bit easier when they're running the adventure for you. Now, if you want to support the channel so I keep doing videos like this, make sure to share, like and subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. Now, you can support me by using Patreon. I have a Patreon page where you get access to all of my live streams and other content. I also have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon, and you'll find a merchandise shelf down underneath all of my videos. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Okay, I'm not gone. Now I am totally aware that this sounds like a lot of doom and gloom. Okay, now if you're a player, I suspect there will be some players in this group. So please be careful if you're a Dungeon Master and you have very specific questions about Hoard of the Dragon Queen. Please be very, very careful about how you word things if you want me to try and answer something, because you will give away spoilers to players. So let's see what we can work our way through. I'm going to go through this fairly quickly. I already said hi to John. Ramblin' Wreck is here. Now, is it Louvre? Louvre. If I got your name wrong, I do apologise. David Burns, retracted. Okay, here we go. Welcome, David, by the way. Darren's here. Thanks, YouTube. Your notifications is 5 minutes late. I do apologise, Darren. Isn't that frustrating? To be fair, I mean, I wasn't sure I was even going to be able to live stream today because they made so many different changes. I couldn't find how to schedule the whole thing. Had to rebuild the whole room. David, what do you got here? Fred, you're a star. Thank you. You're welcome, David. I'm hoping that was enough information for players to work their way through the adventure without giving away any major spoilers. I have been pretty general in the things that I've said, but if you focus on the big pieces, and that is, it's a railroad. Stick with the railroad. Be patient. Make smart choices. Don't be greedy. Follow your Dungeon Master prompts and clues, and you'll get through it. Okay, and then out the other end, then you get to go and play The Rise of Tiamat, which is really, I mean, honestly, if anything, one of the best advice you could have is skip Hoard of the Dragon Queen and go straight to the final adventure, because it's a lot more fun for Dungeon Masters and honestly a bit more fun for all the players as well, if you ask me. Okay. Ethael? Hello, how's it going? I don't know if I got your name right. If I didn't get your name right, I do apologise. Luz, how's it going? I thought this campaign was great. Good. Get a warning. Yeah, this video is very much a warning. A lot of my videos on the Hoard of the Dragon Queen are a warning, because it was always spouted as being a really good adventure to run when you're starting out. And the honest truth is that you will actually find that a railroad, a linear adventure, can actually be more troublesome in some cases, particularly if they go off track. I've looked at all of the designers' feedback on this adventure and what they were trying to achieve, and some of the things they were trying to achieve are very experimental, and they really expected the Dungeon Master to do a lot of work. They really expected the Dungeon Master to use their brain to solve all the problems they might have created by being a little bit nutty about things. They put in things here that a lot of dungeon masters would never ever consider putting into their campaign, just because the very philosophy behind it seems wrong. And I think it's odd because the designers of this adventure have got a really good track record, but this is one time when things did not go well. Okay, Ross. Hi, Ross. Thanks for helping a lazy DM. You are welcome, Ross. We'll be getting back to the lazy DM. I think encumbrance is going to be on the list at some point. Vetro Valid, Windmaster, Arcane Trickster player. Okay, all right. I'm going to use my mage hand to touch the Hoard. Just be really careful, like I said. Remember, treasure, hands off. Hands off. Otherwise, things go badly. You'll understand once you start playing the adventure what I'm talking about. All right, Darren, I share your opinion on the module thread. Yeah, it's a shame, Darren. It should not have been this way. It should have been something else. There was no excuse. And if there was ever a book that needed to be remade, this is the one. Okay. All hell break loose. Yes, that's right. Arcane Trickster players. Well, I rolled a nat 20 on my stealth, so my so not my problem. Yeah. So I had players who did something very similar, but the problem is you've got to remember that rolling a nat 20, a natural 20, getting a high roll or a high score on checks doesn't always mean that you are safe. And I will assure you that that is the case with this adventure. Alec, hi Alec. Would you recommend combining this adventure with others, perhaps intermixing them, or would that only complicate things further? Alec, that's actually a really good question. I would not, to be honest, Alec. There's only, if you're a dungeon master, there's really only 4 chapters in the whole adventure that I would even bother with. Honestly, I'm serious. The first chapter, which is really, really difficult, I'd keep that. The second one, I'd keep that. The third one, I'd keep that. And then everything else in between, I'd skip that and go right to the very end, because the last chapter, which I'm not going to go into because there's players in the room, is like an awesome idea. It's a fantastic, it was the draw card for me. When I ran this adventure and I looked at it, I was thinking, yeah, I don't like a lot of this stuff, but that very last chapter is so cool that I would like to run the adventure just because of that last chapter. If I ever had to do it again, and it's very unlikely that I ever would, I would literally just run chapter 1 or episode 1, chapter 2, chapter 3, and then chapter 8, and I would skip everything else, and life would be a lot easier. The problem is you would have to sort of push people's level up between chapter 3 and chapter 8 for them to be able to sort of pull it off. Hi David, what do you got here? Never had an adventure that needed so much work, but with a little work and a few relevant side adventures, the story and the follow-up to Rise of Tiamat is great. Yeah, look, the follow-up adventure is really cool. It is very much a skeleton adventure for a dungeon master. There's not a lot there, and you really want to use milestones for that particular part of the campaign. And honestly, I would recommend using milestones too in something like Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I would just break it up and use milestones and go from there. That would be the much easier way to go. So if you were to use all the chapters, all 1 to 8, then you'd go a milestone for every chapter. And then if you're going to do it, just run episode 1, 2, and 3 and make life really, really fun for the players and not give them the hard, boring stuff. And then the last one, then I'd just make them probably level 2 would be better to start with rather than level 1. I think they would enjoy that a lot more. And then go, although you can go level 1 if you must, and then another level for the next chapter, and another level for the next chapter, and then skip them up. The adventure at the very end, I would say you can probably be about levels 5 to 6 through to level 8 to pull off the last chapter. You don't necessarily have to be level 8. So yes, and I think you will find that actually the players will enjoy themselves more if they're not level 8. Just a quick warning there in terms of how to deal with that. What do we got here? Lewis will do, haha. Okay, thank you, Lewis. I do appreciate it. Not a noob DM campaign, got it. Great tips, you are welcome. I'm also working through, for those of you who are new Dungeon Masters, and if that's why you came here, hoping to find a bit more information on the Tyranny of Dragons. Look, Dragon of Ice by a Peak from the Dungeons and Dragons Essentials kit is... I mean, there's some problems with that adventure, but it's certainly going to be a lot easier for you to manage than something like Hoard of the Dragon Queen. And I think the players will quite likely enjoy themselves more because there's a lot more options. I still think that the Lost Mine of Phandelver is absolutely the place you want to start for a new Dungeon Master, though. Okay, 007 Slice of Solstice. Okay. Could combine the Tyranny of Dragons with Storm King's Thunder, solve the... no, it wouldn't solve that problem. You've got to understand that when you have a story that is pretty much on a track and there's no sort of options to deal with coming off the track, and the problem is with this adventure is literally, when I was talking about it, when the adventure comes off the track, okay, it's actually really hard to get it back on the track. I'm quite serious when I say that you as a Dungeon Master may decide to abandon the campaign if it happens. There have been Dungeon Masters who have made it work, but I've heard a lot of Dungeon Masters who said, look, we got partway through, we got to about halfway through, and it just all came apart, and I just didn't want to continue. Okay, both involve lots of travel, so I thought it could... yeah, no. See, Storm King's Thunder has a lot of problems too. It should be an easy adventure to work through, but my friend who ran Storm King's Thunder had a lot of problems finding stuff, even though it's got a flowchart. So yes, not necessarily a good idea to combine them. You create more problems for yourself. Okay, what else here? You said a lot of negative about the entire module. Yes, I did. Yes, absolutely. I was extremely negative. You're quite right. Yeah. Look, you know what I would say to you? I would since I've been so negative about Hoard of the Dragon Queen, I would go to your Dungeon Master and say, look, can we just play the first 3 chapters, the last chapter of Hoard of the Dragon Queen, and go straight into the Rise of Tiamat? Because the only reason that you really want to play this adventure, more than likely, is to go up against the Queen of Dragons. That was really the big focus. Nobody else was really interested in anything else, I found. And to be honest, there's far more dragon stuff going on in the last adventure than the first adventure. So I would go to your Dungeon Master and say, look, why not ditch a whole lot of it, and let's go and just play the last one and just start at level 8 or 10 and go from there. I think level 10 is probably good enough. 8 would be fine too. David Burns, what do you got here? I think milestones are better for role-playing in general. They certainly avoid XP grinding and helping to ensure my players were properly scaled for each part. Yeah, so David makes a good point. One of the problems you'll find is there's not enough experience points, particularly if you have a big group. There are not enough experience points awarded throughout the adventure to get you to the level you need to be, particularly for the end. But much more importantly, to deal with the next adventure, the Rise of Tiamat. Okay? I need a drink of water. Apologies. Okay, Alec, what do you got here? Thanks for the advice, Fred. I'm planning on running it after Phandelver. I can add content from I Spy a Peak and the extra digital adventure that came with it. Yep, fair enough. And get them to level 8. Yep, you could add stuff in if you really wanted to. Okay, what else we got here? Since we are talking about good starting adventures, what do you think about going from Waterdeep Dragon Heist to Waterdeep Dungeon of the Mad Mage? Okay, I haven't run Waterdeep Dragon Heist yet. As far as I can tell, it's actually a pretty good adventure. I felt like the different seasons that are involved really helps. I think you'll find the transition will work really well for you. So my advice to you is you'll probably find that Waterdeep Dragon Heist going into Dungeon of the Mad Mage will work really well. And I plan to use Dungeon of the Mad Mage myself very shortly, because even though it says Dungeon of the Mad Mage, and we're assuming there's going to be lots of dungeons, the environments are very different. They're very mixed, and so there should be plenty of variety and the opportunity to go other places. But yeah, I don't think you'll have too many problems with that. I am my own DM. I am watching this video, so I know what to tell my players. Okay, all right. But yeah, if you decide to run Hoard of the Dragon Queen to make your players feel less frustrated with the story, my advice to you is just run, you could literally just run episode 1, 2, and 3. They will probably enjoy those. I know that my players struggled with the first chapter. They really liked the second chapter. The third chapter was all right. And then after that, I would just do a montage scene and then get them to the last episode or chapter in Hoard of the Dragon Queen. And then after that, it's all pretty good stuff as far as I'm concerned for the Rise of Tiamat. It might be a bit light on information, but it does give you a lot of room and space to move, and your players a lot of space to move. And it's the type of adventure, that's what your players were really looking for in the first place. I know if there's any people here watching this who are wanting to play Hoard of the Dragon Queen, it really isn't the first adventure that's going to capture their imagination. It's going to be the last one, okay? Pardon me, I just need another drink of water. Okay, I think we've got through all the questions. So unless there are more questions or feedback on Hoard of the Dragon Queen, whether you're a player or a dungeon master, I think I've tried to narrow it down so that it's going to work for you guys. We've managed to be very general in terms of what we talked about with regard to Hoard of the Dragon Queen, so we don't spoil it for our players. And yeah, I think that's, and actually you've highlighted, which is really good, you've highlighted probably the best way to run Hoard of the Dragon Queen. I'd thought about it a few times, but I never actually considered doing a specific video on that topic, which would be nice and short too, which I'm all for. Hi, what's that, David? Thanks for making this. I asked a few weeks back and wasn't sure if you have time with such a troublesome adventure. I'll be running this again soon, and I'll be sure to show my players this now. Okay, good. Thank you, David. No, I did see your I did see it, David, and I did think it was a good idea. I've just been busy. You know, you'll find that all the YouTubers right now are in a bit of panic mode, trying to make sure that they secure their channel so that they're doing all the right things. It takes a bit of time to do that. It's going to take me a lot of time as well. So I hadn't forgotten about it. I've definitely been thinking about it quite a lot. Good video, Fred. Thank you, Darren. Would ask about the episode 8, but no spoilers. Yeah, no, I can't really give you anything else about episode 8 without giving away spoilers. I'll tell you what. At some point, I will eventually talk about episode 8. I've talked about episode 1, 2, and 3 for Hoard of the Dragon Queen, And really the only other chapter that I feel like is actually worthwhile talking about is episode 8. I don't know when that'll happen, but I will get around to at some point putting together some content to talk about that for the Dungeon Master. Okay? I just can't promise you when. I just don't know when. Okay. I think we are done for today. Thankfully. All right. So wherever you are in the world, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, the very early morning, the wee hours, look after your family and your friends and yourself. And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.